What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the same. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Weisz.
Dr. Jeremy Weisz here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I have Laura Barnard of Breakthrough Brands. And Laura, before I formally introduce you, I like to mention other episodes people should check out of the podcast. And since this is, you basically help women leaders, I'm going to make a mention to Andrea Houston. I had her on the podcast, and she also runs Lead Like a Woman podcast, and she just came out with a book. And I'm probably going to recommend you to be on her podcast as well. So Andrea does amazing work. So check out that episode. And also, since we're talking agency talk, I did a couple episodes with Jason Swank, where he talks about how he built and then sold his 8-figure agency. And then Todd Taskey also helps match agencies with private equity. So they sell, and he has a Second Bite podcast. So check those out. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And we do that by helping you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a business to launch and run a podcast. We do accountability, strategy, and execution. You know, for me, Laura, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I found no better way to do that over the past decade than to profile the people and companies I most admire and let everyone else know what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com. We're happy to answer them. And I'm excited to introduce today's guest, and a big shout out to Jennifer Fortney for introducing us, even though we have a mutual friend, family member, Rebecca Beliasny. But Jennifer introduced us. She runs CascadeComms.com. You can check that out. But Laura Barnard founded Breakthrough Brands to empower women and her LGBTQIA plus community to break through barriers, close gender gaps in leadership. And while previously leading strategic, strategy for iconic brands, you've heard them, Haribo, Wrigley, Werther's, Skittles. And she's seen that role and helped bold brands play in creating a lot of impact. And her background is very impressive, in psychology from Harvard. She got her MBA at University of Chicago, and that's kind of helped shape and formed her belief that great brands start with a limitless mindset. And Laura, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's great to meet you again. And I love the connection to talk about relationships of the two very different circles of folks who sort of led me to this moment with you. So I'm really excited to chat with you today. And back to shouting out to Jennifer and Rebecca to being our common points of connection. I love that.
So talk about Breakthrough Brands and what you do.
So Breakthrough is a brand building agency that empowers women leaders. We are in our 4th year of business, and we are really focused on serving women leaders in 2 specific ways. One is through our one-on-one brand development, coaching, and consultation. And the other is through leadership workshops, webinars, et cetera, to empower and enable women leaders to unlock their brands.
So we're going to dig into exactly that, and because other people will learn, how do you unlock your brand, right? But the first question is, I want to hear some of the learnings from working at big companies, because you bring all this breadth of experience to the companies and brands you work with. A couple learnings from Haribo and Wrigley.
Right. So I think, looking back at my career in retrospect, I spent a little over 15 years in what I'll call corporate America, and really focusing in on this brand management industry and this profession. And I look to back when I first figured out what the heck brand management was when I was in business school. And I was really eager to apply my passion for psychology and my desire to understand why people think, act, and behave in the ways that they do into business. And brand management emerged for me really early on as a way to do that, to bring psychology into sales, into strategy, into business management. And I was fortunate at University of Chicago to meet a number of folks who worked at the time was the Wrigley Company in Chicago, which has since been acquired by the Mars organization. But the team at Wrigley and the folks that I met early on, the marketers that I met, were in the jobs that I wanted to be in. So I had the great aspirational role models to look up to, working in a fast-paced category like confections, working with beloved, iconic consumer brands. You talk about Skittles, Starburst, M&M's, Snickers. These are, household names, right? And I knew that if I could learn from them and be like them, so to speak, I could really grow and have an impactful career in this field. My time at Wrigley really taught me number one thing in marketing, and I still hold true to this day, is you have to know your consumer, know who you're serving, and know them really, really well. What motivates them, what inspires them, what helps them make decisions, what do they need in their life, what benefits are they seeking, what gaps can you help close for them. And I learned how to manage large businesses, with cross-functional teams and P&Ls and 5-year plans, 1-year marketing strategies. All those different tools were part of what I was practicing. The move to Haribo, kind of midstream for me, really was my desire to advance in my leadership. There was a senior level position that was open. It was a head of marketing role that I was eager to take on. And I was a little bit impatient when I look back to my Wrigley days. I wasn't getting there fast enough. And Haribo was in a situation where they were really going to market in the US for the first time in earnest as a brand. We had been distributing Haribo gummy bears, as I'm sure you've had them, and we've all enjoyed those. They're mostly entering the US through third-party distributors, and the organization, it's a family-owned business, decided to plant their stake in the ground here in the US and go to market more intentionally. They needed a new, almost a new brand for the US market and a new go-to-market. So I was, I think, employee number 4 in the US office that has now grown to, I think over 150 folks there. But to be part of that early stage growth and in that leadership role to identify the team, the talent that we needed to bring in, the agency partners that we needed to work with, and really reposition a beloved, 100-year plus old brand, reposition it in the US for relaunch. And that was very exciting. That was, kind of scratched the entrepreneurial itch that I kind of always had of having something start from scratch, right? And kind of had that idea of building something, creating something. So Wrigley Mars kind of taught me how to be a marketer. Haribo began to teach me how to lead and, have decision-making over a brand and kind of growing a team. And I also learned quickly, kind of go to the end of that journey, that I was really destined to do something more entrepreneurial. I had grown up, my parents are entrepreneurs. My both grandparents on both sides are entrepreneurs. My wife has been an entrepreneur for the better part of the last 20 years. And there's a little bit of a stifling effect of corporate roles that can feel like you're getting boxed in a little bit. And I really was desiring to kind of break out of that and start something new, applying what I learned about branding and marketing, but doing it with more autonomy, more ownership, and ultimately more purpose.
So much to unpack there, Laura. I have a few follow-up, but I try and be healthy. But if you put a Haribo gummy in front of me, I'm all over it. So
it's a small indulgence, but
What did your parents and grandparents do?
So my grandparents, a lot of the work that they've all done has been in the real estate industry, home building, for many, many years. And they have also reinvented through the years. My parents are now restaurateurs, so they opened Aurelio's Pizza is a beloved Chicago pizza chain, but they are entrepreneurs and franchisees of 2 Aurelio's locations, one in the Chicago area and one down in Florida. So they pivoted, 3 decades into their career out of home building into the restaurant industry, and that's kind of been their journey.
So I'd love to hear a little bit about the reposition of the relaunch for Haribo, because this is, you bring that to the brands you work with. What were some of the things that stuck out when you were repositioning this brand for relaunch?
Yeah, I think, back to the rule of knowing the consumer, I think there was a lot of good research and insights that we did right away on the US consumer. We knew a lot about the international consumer, and there's not a ton of differences about how folks consume candy or how candy gets into a household through these what we call gatekeepers, right? The decision maker, the person buying the groceries of the household. So we had to check some assumptions that we had about the consumer, starting with consumer insights and research, and really understanding the role of something like confections in the day-to-day life of the average, household in America, right? And we are always there's a fine line, with in terms of the health and wellness trends. Obviously, we want to make sure that we were understanding the role that candy played in terms of this small indulgence, this sometimes an escape for people, a reward, a treat, a break, and making sure that it was part of, obviously part of a more balanced diet, so to speak. So understanding the role that the product played in the consumer's life, that was our first step in the journey to repositioning. And then I think
really,
when you
just on
when you
that
have,
for a second,
yeah,
Laura, because I love this discussion around understanding the consumer. This applies to any business, and this
yeah,
is probably one of the things that you talk about with the clients you work with. But
yes.
were there anything that surprised you when you were testing your assumptions, whether it was with Haribo or Skittles, or because I think people who've been doing it for a long time may go in with, oh, I've done this so many times, I already know, but you kind of come at it with, well, let's test the assumptions, right?
Yeah.
So what surprised you with those assumptions when it could be Haribo or one of
Yeah.
the other
Yeah.
brands?
I think back, and this was probably early on in my, talk about the confections category. I think back to when I worked on the Skittles brand, and we would do, and again, Wrigley was very, very big into consumer insights. We invested a lot of resources in that area. The surprising thing for me, and this may not be so surprising now as I'm older because I have kids, but what people say and what they do is sometimes very different. So you'll ask, someone in a focus group, for example, do you eat candy? Or do you have candy around the house? And a mom or a dad or parent or caregiver will say, no, I don't eat candy. Like, no. You follow them in their homes. So there's these things called ethnographies. We actually are in the home with someone, or you're shopping, traveling like shoulder to shoulder with someone, watching their behavior. And you're at their home, and you say, well, where's the candy? And there's a secret stash somewhere in their office drawer, right? So you find that they have candy, So what people say, what people do, are often not quite matched up. And it's not disingenuous, but just like what, from a insights gathering perspective, you have to be cautious with surveys or kind of what people articulate, and really watch behavior and see what has happened in the past, and look for actually artifacts and clues versus what people want to be perceived as.
And you, going back to your college days, you played sports in college.
Yes.
What was one of the learnings from that?
Yeah. So, and I was, whenever I hear like my bio and people skip over, they talk about psychology at Harvard, but they skip basketball. I kind of think about, I like majored in basketball and I minored in psychology. So basketball was sort of predominant in my life. And it had been up until that point. It still is a big part of my life, as a parent and as a coach now. But what I learned from basketball, I learned what it meant to be a leader. I learned what it meant to be part of a team. I learned what it meant to empower young women. I look back and I don't really think about the wins and the losses and the stats, because I was actually, my senior year, I was captain of the team, and I was the last kid on the bench. So I was kind of that leader from the bench, and I learned kind of to observe and know roles and how to use communication in different ways to influence and motivate people. And I watched, the best mentor ever for leadership was my coach at Harvard, Kathy Delaney Smith, and really, taking a page from her book, so to speak, and applying that in my own life as a leader, as a manager, as a parent, as a spouse, et cetera. But really, Harvard basketball taught me how to lead. That's
really uncommon, right? Someone who is on the bench as the captain, right?
I think it's typically, I think is uncommon, but I think maybe at Harvard it's more common than folks might think. But there's just different roles that, there's the statistical leaders, right? And there's sometimes roles for other folks that are, you always say, leading from the bench or leading from the locker room. That's important to team dynamics.
Oh, it speaks a lot to your leadership if that is the case.
Yeah.
So things are going well. I mean, you're working and you're moving up in these companies. What was a spark that caused you to start your own business?
Yeah. So as I said, it'd been about 15 years, climbing the ladder and doing, quote unquote, what I was supposed to be doing, advancing, going after the next level always, and trying to improve my skill set, my leadership, all these things. And we back in 2017, we actually, my wife's job actually moved us out to New Hampshire. So kind of new refresh, trying something different, an adventure with the kids, new job for Lindsay. And we picked up the family from Chicago, moved to New Hampshire, new job for me, new job for Lindsay, new state, new schools. Like, what could possibly go wrong, right? Like, it's just a few things changing. I had this gift of time and space when we moved. We took some time off to help with our new baby. And I was really in that more of a reflective mode of what I wanted to do, kind of this next chapter, and kind of that self-reflection, self-awareness, and just kind of taking inventory of where I'd been and what we wanted to do next as a family and as for myself professionally. I left the Haribo world and I entered into the consulting space for about 2 years for a company in Chicago called Blue Dog Design. They do brand and innovation strategy for some of the top CPG firms in the world. Learned that skill set. It was something different. Being a consultant's different than being a brand manager or kind of a manager of people. And in 2019, I was home from a consulting trip, and I was watching the Final Four basketball because I'm a basketball nut. And there was a press conference interview with the great Notre Dame coach, Muffet McGraw. And I was just captivated by her words, her presence, and she had this very strong call to action about the need for more visible women leaders in sports, in business, and politics. And, when is it not going to be this exception, but the norm that women are leading? And I think I had a light bulb go off for me. And I said, I was compelled to do something about what I was hearing from Muffet and to do something in my own life. And I thought about applying what I know about branding, marketing, storytelling, positioning. I said, what if I could apply that to this opportunity to advance women leaders, the branding of women leaders? That was what I saw was missing. One small part of that mission of advancing women, it could be this idea of branding. And my first phone call was to Kathy Delaney Smith. We were about an hour from Boston at the time where we lived. And I said, can I come meet with you and talk to you about this idea I have about branding women leaders? Because you were the most influential woman leader in my life. You're a role model. And it's not for Kathy. It wasn't about selling stuff. It was about increasing her impact. And I said, people need to hear you. People need to see you. People can benefit from what you have to say. So how do we, quote unquote, brand you to get you out to more people and get your messaging out? And she was a reluctant first guinea pig client, I'll call it. But through the years, she helped us hone what we do and grow the network around those leaders in sports who we wanted to increase visibility of through their brands. And then that has kind of parlayed into these other industries. But it was really truly that moment in 2019, hearing Muffet McGraw's speech, that call to action that kind of woke me up and said, I need to do something with the skill set I have and apply it more towards this purpose.
So talk about what you did with your coach.
Right. So with Kathy, it was interesting because a lot of the work that we do today is trying to get people to really know who they are. And someone like Kathy pretty clearly she knows who she is. So she kind of was an accelerated student in that regard, but there were aspects of her that the world didn't know. She knew it, but she wasn't sharing more broadly. And beyond being
is it just because she's too close to it that she didn't realize, or what
combination? Is it? I think too close to it would be the nicest way to put it. I think sometimes it's if people are either too humble, they're not willing, they don't want to be self-promotional. They sometimes are blind to it, or they don't see it, or they may have a limiting belief about themselves that prevents it from going out more broadly, so to speak. So it's kind of these internal barriers, and sometimes it's just being a private person, but for a lot of folks, it's an internal barrier. So working with Kathy early on through these kind of discovery interviews and questions, and this is someone I've known for 20 years, but I'm asking her through this like motivational interviewing techniques, trying to get to something deeper. Why does she coach? Why does she love sports? Why does she focus on empowering young women? Where is this coming from? And it ultimately led us to this place, through this discovery with her, that she, beyond just a basketball coach, she is a gender equity advocate. She's a Title IX pioneer, and she's an absolute leadership expert. And those words at first made her very uncomfortable because she will say, I'm just a basketball coach, and I know who I am, and my strengths, my weaknesses, I know, and I'm not that. But no, actually, here's why you are these things. And these are the proof points, and just reminding her of her 51 years of coaching, what she had done, not just winning games, but the battles that she fought and won, and the battles that she fought and lost, and the behind the scenes work that she was doing, the speaking that she was doing, the conversations she had sort of through her network. And someone like Kathy is a phone call away from someone like the great Billie Jean King, right? I'm like, why are you connected to Billie Jean King? This great icon of equity in women's sports. And because you're friends, because you're like-minded, you're kind of in the same ballpark, and just putting her in a place where, okay, you're not just this one facet person, you're multifaceted. You have a message. People need to hear what you have to say. And how do we put that message out to the world? And that's where like the content strategy piece comes in. So the branding work starts with that discovery and getting real clear on who you are internally, who you are externally to others, and getting those stakes in the ground of what you want to stand for. And then shouting those things out to the world and speaking about them and writing about them and interviewing in podcasts like this, like talking about those things. So we try to identify those most salient aspects of the leader that we want to shine a light on. And it's not to just for self-promotional purposes at all. It's in service of other people.
So how did she answer that? Why do you coach? What did you come to?
So it comes down to empowerment. It's in a word. I think it's empowering young women. If you think about someone like Kathy, who, again, remarkable, 51 years. She coached for 11 years at the high school level in Massachusetts, and then 40 years at the helm at Harvard. Always think, working with somewhere, 16 to 22-year-old young women, right, for all those years, and staying current and relevant and evolving, but always sort of keeping that pulse on that critical age. I think for entry into adulthood, that critical age of confidence building, or confidence busting in some cases, making sure that we are equipping women to step into leadership roles, and not just taking the alternate path. You
mentioned there's a brand unlock, right?
Yes.
That you go through discovery, and then there's kind of a brand activation, which is the next phase.
Yeah.
If someone is listening, they're thinking, this sounds great, I really need to get to the essence of what I'm about so I can really share it. How does the brand unlock work?
Yeah, so we've developed what we are considering and is evolving into this proprietary process. And we've now delivered this brand unlock for over 100 women leaders, and it's been refined and adjusted and streamlined to be what we believe is a very efficient and effective 4-week process. So it's, you talk about the easy button for your podcast, right? It's not quite an easy button for brand building, but it makes it clear and effective for these women leaders who are doing a lot of other things, right? This is their brand is not something that's the top of their list of their big to-dos necessarily in their day-to-day. So how do we make it efficient and effective? So our process that takes 4 weeks breaks down into 3 basic phases. We call them discovery, defining, and unlocking. And the discovery phase, as I mentioned with Kathy, that we spent a lot of time in discovery of understanding, a deeper level of insights into who this person is as a leader, what inspires them, what motivates them, what are these key characteristics and personality traits that they see in themselves, but that also that others see in them. We discover, we have a client, we actually interview 4 of their champions who can tell us, if the person can't, how they're perceived, what are their greatest opportunities. They help vision cast for them. They help tell us what makes these people so great. So we spend a lot of time in discovery. That's pretty much the first 2 weeks of the project. Then we start to move towards
really quickly defining. On the discovery part.
Yeah.
I imagine people, from what you're saying, let's say they're humble, or they're maybe uncomfortable in the process and totally. Sharing. So how do you get them to open up and actually share when they're resistant?
Yes. Good question. And we warn them that we're going to make them uncomfortable. So we don't try to catch anyone off guard. We set it up to be very clear in terms of, first of all, opening up just, in written form. What do you want us to know about you, right? Kind of an intake onboarding form. And that's, quick 5-minute exercise. We just want to see first blush. What is someone kind of sharing about themselves? We lead that into a 60-minute, really deep discovery interview with the client. That's, I'll say the word like motivational interviewing technique. Some folks will understand what that means, but we're trying to ask, open-ended, curated questions that get into the deeper understanding of their purpose, mission, vision, their impact. And we have, if we're not making them uncomfortable, we're not doing our job, sort of, in some cases. So we try to get them to a place where they're thinking in a different way about, what they do as a profession, or how they've gotten to where they are, and getting back to that question of why, and connecting that to purpose, mission, vision, values, beliefs. And so it's like, peeling the onion and getting deeper, deeper, deeper. And, people will say, hey, I'm a little bit uncomfortable, or they'll cry, they'll get emotional. I think when we get that place where we're getting deeper understanding, that's great. It doesn't happen all the time. It happens a lot, though, that people are willing to be vulnerable in that, safe space, confidential, one-on-one setting. And our interviewer is on our team, is Lori Panthil, is incredible. We call her Lopra, like Oprah Winfrey, but Lori is a masterful interviewer, gets people very comfortable. And we really are thoughtful about the questions. We do our homework on the person beforehand. And then I'll say the interviews that we do with the client's key stakeholders, those are golden. Those are people who can speak to the strengths, talents, abilities, the resiliency of these clients. They'll tell us stuff that the client won't tell us about themselves. They will, toot the horn of the client, so to speak, when the client is afraid to come off as, self-aggrandizing. So we really, really value the interviews that we have with our clients, kind of core group of champions. That's where we learn the most. And we play back those insights of those interviews to the client. And that's where, light bulbs go off. And sometimes that makes them uncomfortable. Like, I'm not that big, or I'm not that important. Well, these are these really important people in your life who say that you are these things, and here's why. So it's just reinforcing with them, showing them those proof points, and getting them out of their own head about it, and getting those inputs from outside trusted resources.
I love it. Yeah. It's kind of like, I picture a personal trainer, like you go and it's uncomfortable. You're going to be sore afterwards, but it's almost like, okay, you feel accomplished afterwards. Exactly. So this is discovery. And the next, you were saying the defining. Yeah.
So we kind of move. So we gather all these inputs. It's just gathering. And then we have to make sense of what we've gathered, right? We have to kind of shine a light on some of these insights. We know what the client's goals were going into the project, but we might have learned something in that discovery that makes us want to reset specific objectives. So we play back, here's what we learned from your interview, from your key stakeholders, your champions interviews. You said this goal, but maybe it's these three goals are kind of new ones, and we sort of help them identify which goal is the one they want to go achieve. And then we also start to bubble up what we call brand values. So this is really where we very succinctly articulate back to those things: purpose, mission, vision, values, beliefs, and motivation. So those things we call them brand values. We put those on a page and we've talked through them. And this is sort of a North Star guide, defining who this leader is from a values perspective. And then part of defining too is a lot of clients come to us at moments of inflection or change, or they want to figure out what's next, or sometimes they got forced out of a role and they're trying to reinvent and relaunch themselves. So we lay out for them, okay, what are the paths that you can take? What are the opportunities for you to position your brand for the most impact that you can have? And we used to call it kind of choose your own adventure, but we sort of define those paths that they could take. And it's, a little bit of career development, a little bit of life coaching, right? But we try to lay out the path and then help them start to bring their brand to life per that pathway that they select.
So then when does the unlocking come in?
So after we define at that midpoint, what are the real goals of their brand? What's that pathway that they want to take? And maybe, it's time for you to, go join a board, or start your business, or go for that next level promotion, right? We identify that path. Okay, now how do you brand yourself? How do you tell your story towards that goal, on that pathway? And in the unlock, that's where we sort of get to the deliverables, right? We do three major things. We help them craft their story. We call it the brand story. And it's not a resume. It's not a bio. It's not accomplishments, accolades. It's more about capabilities. It's more about who they are as a person, and what and how they do things. But most importantly, we have to infuse why they do what they do in their story. So it's about a 2,000 word version of a narrative that we can share with them, but then they internalize, and that's how they begin to talk about themselves. And that's the most powerful, absolute, tangible and powerful deliverable that we unlock and come out with. Under that story, you can imagine kind of some key messaging themes, some subject matter expertise areas, some content ideas that help support that brand story. So we identify brand messaging themes, and then we also layer in this idea of a brand archetype, which is guidance on how you verbally share your story, your tone of voice, who you relate with best from an audience perspective, back to knowing your consumer or knowing your audience. But we give them the story, the messaging guidance, and this archetype reference for them to help figure out how they bring that brand out to the world, share that with others.
What would be an example of a goal? I don't know, it was Kathy's goal going in, and then what was it going out after the process?
Yeah. So, goal, I think her goal has always remained, at the highest level, back to that notion of empowerment. As a coach, her goal was to win, very simply, win basketball games, get individual players to develop and grow and perform at their best, get the team to perform at their best. And the greatest litmus test of that is winning and losing. It's a pretty clear, the scoreboard is there, right? It's a clear goal and objective. And I don't think in all of her years, was there ever a season where she didn't want to win? No, she wants to win. Take away the coach aspect. You put the whistle down for the last time. Okay, now what is your goal? And that becomes a little bit less clear. But you think about what winning means in the basketball sense, and what winning means kind of from a life perspective. And she is still a coach and an inspiration and a role model for young women. It's just not on the basketball court. So how can she still have this goal of empowerment and winning as women, and bring that into, I'll say real life, but kind of post basketball. So her goals now are related towards, I think, impact in terms of promoting leadership in women, leadership skill development, inspiring leadership in women, moving the needle on gender equity in sports. That will never go away. There's still, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of Title IX this year. Tons of great work has been done and accomplished to move the needle on equity in education and in athletics. Still a lot of work to be done. So she wants to, be more clear voice and advocate for that type of work. And then I think just being able to share her story, because again, when we share our story, we can be an inspiration for others. So this idea of leadership, equity, and kind of sharing her story. And flash forward, we are a very concrete goal is getting her book published in the year.
I love this because I can see how it's so important to have a North Star, to have the messaging down, because that drives goals and everything that someone's going to do. So you do the brand unlock, and then talk about phase 2. So what's next with the brand activation? And you could talk about.
And I think this is we are our bread and butter, so to speak, and 90% of what we do with clients and from a revenue perspective is on focus on the brand unlock. We are dabbling, I'll say, in the activation realm. And this is kind of goes back to like who we are, who we serve, what we do, and like what we don't do. And we're trying to be a little bit selective, but imagine once you're equipped with this brand unlock and this playbook for your brand, what do I do now is always a question. And in some cases, take the example of, we've worked with several top head coaches, kind of post Kathy, I'll say, but that are currently coaching, right? Who do this work, and they'll hand it off to their staff, their marketing folks, their athletic department, and say, hey, this is my brand. Let this help guide our content. Let this help guide, as simple as my bio on the university website, but this should help guide what we talk about on social media, for example. So it serves as a content guide for folks who help someone like a head coach activate their brand, right? We have been done some projects, and this is where we are trying to hone in our expertise and like what we sell to be really, really good at it, really, really effective. But personal websites, social media strategies, speech writing, podcast strategy development, book proposal writing. So there are many ways of the activation come to life, and I could go on, but you can sense my hesitation because it's a very wide range of things, and we're a team of 8, and we're trying to be really laser focused on this brand unlock. So ideally, we hand off the brand unlock, and there's a team, either that if it's an executive, it's their support team or their marketing department, or if it's a head coach, it's their staff and marketing resources, where they hand off the guide, and those folks can do the better activation work because they're closest to that business or that person. So we're actually trying to step a little bit away from the activation because there's a lot of agencies that do that. And we're trying to know who we stay kind of true to who we are and what we do best.
Yeah, I want to talk about that because before we hit record, we were talking about intentional growth, right?
Yeah.
And this kind of leads into how do you grow? And because I could see how you could take the brand unlock, you could do social media posts, you could do blogs, you could do, it may help with an after game interview. If it's a coach, it could lead to a book. Like when you say empowerment and there's a subtitle, like I could totally envision that being turned into a book, what you did.
Yes.
And so how do you think about intentional growth? Because like you said, you want to stay in your lane, but there's this other people are calling you to do these other things. You have great partners in certain aspects. You do it yourself. How do you think about intentional growth?
Yeah, I think, it starts with, knowing yourself or knowing yourself as an organization. And I go back to, I'll say it again, like, know who you are, know why you exist, know who you serve, know what their needs are, their opportunities are, and try to match that the best you can, and as uniquely as you can. And I think there are a lot of marketing agencies. There's hundreds of thousands of them probably in the US, right? There's a lot of branding agencies. What we're focusing in on is this notion of building leadership brands for women. And that's, to me, I've been in this now 20 years. It sort of emerged as something different and missing and unique, and really laser focusing in on that. What does that mean? What can we do to get better? If we do have an opportunity, if we work with a client through a brand unlock, and they're just destined to, give a TED talk or be a paid keynote speaker, right? There are speaker bureaus and agencies that are way better at getting that person placed into those high profile speaking opportunities than we are. So we're trying to get real clear internally, have that focus, and then understand, okay, what are the who are the partners out there that offer a service that is in need? And we obviously vet them, but so we are, willing, and we must refer folks out once they need that, especially in that activation realm. But I think, when we talk about focus, right? So last year was really the first year that I felt like the lenses started to come together and things came into focus. In terms of what we needed to do to drive growth. And we talked about, we had clients in the sports space. We had clients through our natural referral networks in the business space, right? But okay, once you kind of reach out to those folks and they tell their friends, okay, now I have to be more outbound, right? With my marketing, selling, driving the brand, right? Creating awareness and being relevant. So how are we going to do that? And I looked at, and I say, I was leading this for the team, but we have a collaborative team approach to say, where are the places we can grow? We look at partnerships with larger organizations, right? So associations of women leaders in business and sports, large organizations who have giant groups of women leaders, right? And pick any, Fortune 500 company, they have women's affinity groups, employee resource groups, and just see what get curious about how they do what they do, how we might fit into that puzzle, right? So rather than just going at it alone, we try to open up our thinking in terms of growing through partnerships and growing through these larger organizations. And then what we've lived through is like really refining and creating less complexity with how we talk about what we do and what we sell. And that's kind of back to my point earlier. What we sell and what we offer the best are these one-on-one brand unlock projects. And we also, through that work, we are getting asked to do workshops and webinars, sort of explaining it. So it's this idea of brand unlocks and workshops and webinars. That's simple, right? That's scalable. We know who to sell that to, how to position ourselves to that audience. And I think we've seen the business in 2021, we doubled the business, and we're now figuring out how to do that even more sustainably and in a more intentional way. And that's, we're looking at a big growth year this year, but it's going to be through the same things, these partnerships, more intentional content strategies, outreach, and then, being more, I'll say, focused on selling, which is the top of the funnel, right?
I love your discipline. It takes a lot of discipline because people are probably pulling you to do certain things. With all that stuff. Yes. So it takes a lot of discipline to be like,
it's hard for me to say no too. Ask my wife. So,
say, hey, this is our lane and we're going to bring in partners to help with these other things.
Yep.
And, I can see, I want to talk about one example with Kit. But I
Yeah.
could see, for you, it seems like the ideal clients, they're business leaders, you have founders, you have healthcare leaders, nonprofit leaders, and sports leaders. Talk about what you did with Kit. And my favorite picture is, I think, this one with Christine. I
Christine.
love it with the WWE
I
belt.
know.
That's my favorite
Christine's
one. So,
another great one.
but
Christine Lawrence, shout out. So Kit Delorier, who's I'll look back to 2019 was our first official paying client, which is an amazing thing. Really, I will never forget, and I'm always grateful to Kit for her willingness to partner with us. And met Kit through a mutual friend of ours, and her reputation preceded her. She's a professional athlete. Kit is, and we can go to her website actually if you want, but so Kit is a two-time freestyle skiing world champion. She's the first person, male or female, to have climbed and skied down the 7 summits of the 7 highest peaks in the world. So, this total badass athlete, right? She approaches me and learns a little bit about what Breakthrough Brands was starting to do at the time. It was a very early stage. And she said, "Can you help me with my brand?" And I said, I was humble, and I was a little bit intimidated, I'll say honestly. Hey, it was just me at the time. It was a solopreneur for a while before we grew the team. And I said, yes, but we need to figure out what our process is, and we need to, I want to get clear on your goals. And she has an army of resources with the North Face, and she's, very intentional person about her brand already. And she already had a website, and she already wrote a book, and all these things. And how could I help her? So I had to get over my own imposter syndrome, I'll call it, in that moment, and say, yes, I have a skill set. I see you, I see your messaging, and I want to help you extend your brand for impact, right? I'm not going to help you get more sponsorship deals. You have lots of those, right? It's more about this idea, this leadership brand. And we started the seeds of thinking with that. So Kit, as an athlete, is positioned a certain way. She's talked about a certain way. She's featured on podcasts, interviews, articles as this ski mountaineer, right? But what is going on behind the scenes with someone like Kit? And what is, again, back to that why, that purpose, mission, vision, values. She was willing to go through this discovery process with us and be vulnerable and get deeper beyond the desire, that adrenaline rush of skiing, right? We hardly talked about skiing or climbing, right? It was about the change that she wanted to see in the world. This idea of, using her platform as an athlete, but creating change specifically as it relates to climate protection and protecting wild places. So we see the Arctic Refuge here, the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. Huge opportunity, huge passion for her, and something that she could apply her brand platform towards protecting, speaking out about, and doing. She goes so far now. There's a documentary that just was released on Kit, but she's helping gather the science, the data, to help tell the story to policymakers about why they shouldn't be, drilling for oil and gas in the Alaska wilderness. So she's connected the dots of something it may seem disjoint, right, out of left field. How is this person, so interested about the Arctic? But getting Kit clear on purpose, bigger than just her profession at the time, right? And getting her to realize this broader impact that she can have on society and on the planet through leveraging her platform. So how does she tell that story? How does she connect the dots for people? What work can she do? I.e., her latest documentary is really for me, years later, to see her put that out to the world, tell that story, really is making a big difference. And I think it's shows that, again, that multifaceted aspect of people. They're not just a basketball coach. You're not just a skier. You're a leader. You can make change. You can have an impact. And how do you talk about that in a way that actually gets people's attention and moves the needle?
And talk about Corinne.
Yeah. Corinne, another person. So that, Kit came to us kind of this high profile, professional athlete. Corinne is someone we met kind of through those professional network associations that I mentioned earlier, ways that we were trying to grow our reach and our impact with women leaders in sports. So Corinne, we first met her through her work for the Pro Sports Assembly, which is an association supporting and advancing folks in the professional sports industry. She was kind of a program and content managing director for them. And as we got to know her through that partnership, it emerged that, there's something driving Corrine, and it was more related to social change and racial equity and elevating minority student athletes and young professionals to be the next generation of leaders. And she was doing a lot of that through her work with Pro Sports Assembly and another nonprofit that she was leading called The Winning Edge. But we were curious with her, is there something else that you want to do to sort of realize that impact and fulfill that intention that you have about advancing this next generation? And so I'll flash forward through the brand unlock. We did do some brand activation work with her, helping her get her business brand sort of cemented and a website produced and all that good stuff. It's called Work, WRK. And we are now proud to look at Corrine as a founder and CEO of a startup, right, that is going to change the game for DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, recruiting, retaining, and hiring in the sports, media, and entertainment industry. So she went from a really, really hardworking, Jane of all trades, did a lot of things right for these nonprofits, into focusing her efforts on this new business that's going to change the industry in a really positive way. So just kind of thinking about the ripple effects of her impact, right? She was having a lot of impact where she was, but could we make it bigger? And could we have her, focus her leadership brand, focus her messaging, create this company where she could tell her story and then be out there in the world really more intentionally advancing these objectives that she has.
I have one last question.
Yes.
And Laura, first of all, thank you. Thanks for sharing your journey. Thanks for sharing your insights. It's super valuable. And I want to first just encourage people to check out your website, and they can go to breakthroughbrands.com. That's break, BREAKTHRU brands.com. If you're watching the video, you can see the website. We're on the website right now, and you can poke around and see some of the cool stuff that they've done and who they worked with. Last question I have is some of your favorite coaches of all time that have influenced you from a distance, or you know them personally?
So when you ask that question, the first visual that pops in my mind is Phil Jackson. Being from the Chicago area, I think we've shared our love of the Bulls. There's a quote from Michael Jordan: "Is my coach is everything." And I actually get emotional talking about it. What Phil Jackson was able to do to unlock the potential of the Bulls. You see with the Lakers. If Phil Jackson's listening, I love you, man. But I really saw his ability to get a very disparate group of people together, united. You talk about having superstars and role players, and the ability to harness the power of their minds and their spirits and bring them together. He's the best.
Who else? I mean, you obviously mentioned Coach Kathy.
Yeah, I mean, then I'll go back to I just 2 weeks ago, now that we're back in the Chicago area, reconnected with my high school basketball coach. His name is Steve Gross. I played at Hinsdale Central High School, western suburbs here. I haven't seen the guy in 20 years. He texted me because he'd heard we were back in Chicago, and he said both his daughters are playing at the University of Chicago. And that was pretty awesome. He said, "You want to come to the game on Sunday? The girls are, his daughters are playing." And I just I met when the girls were babies, right? Newborns. And just to see he's still connected to the game. His daughters are playing at the collegiate level. He really prepared me for, from a mental toughness perspective, from a physical toughness perspective, from kind of the grit, hard work. We were a scrappy team in high school. We didn't score a lot of points, but the opponents scored fewer points. So really it's this idea of like a just team defense mentality. And I told him this, once I played for Steve Gross, and he would be known to have anger management issues, like blurt out or yell or smack his clipboard or toss a basketball, right? I was prepared for any sort of adversity in the professional world because I'd been through the gauntlet with that guy. So he made me tough, helped me sort of see the potential in myself, and to kind of see it full circle that his daughters are playing in college was pretty cool.
I love it.
Yep.
First of all, Laura, thank you. Everyone check out breakthroughbrands.com. Thanks, Laura. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. It's great to see you.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like 100 grand.